Lovely. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending this short, quick talk. It's supposed to be 10 minutes, but I think I've got about 6 minutes of slides. So let's see here can get ready. That'd be good. So what I'm here to talk about is Windy. It's a tiny package, this for now. Hopefully it goes into something a bit bigger, and it's Tailwind.css for Shiny. Don't know if you've ever used it. But first, before I get into that, a little bit about me there. So I'm John, I run UpEffects, which is a small company out of Geneva. I'm working on shinymetrics.com if you want to take a look at that. It's in closed alpha currently. I wrote JavaScript for R book and authored a few packages. Some of them you might even have heard of, like I don't know, Reach Out for R, Waiter, and quite a few others. So before I go into this, just a show of hands, who actually uses Shiny here in the room? Okay, and of you, how many actually write CSS code? Quite a few, okay, goodness. I thought I was in the wrong auditorium or something. Okay, so CSS, very basic, right? So you just write your CSS code in some sort of, in the style sheet. And then generally classes, IDs, you can have plenty of selectors, of course, but that's what you tend to use. And here you have a header class that makes the text red and bold, and then you use it in Shiny like so. So there's not too much going on. But I see personally issues with writing your own CSS, not with CSS itself, but writing your own CSS. I'm picking two here. There's probably tons more, or more if you disagree with me. But one is just code organization. So variable declaration and use in CSS can be a nightmare because they can be all over the place. You have style as well, which is, to be fair, a pain in, well, outside of CSS as well. Even when you contribute on a package, you write your functions in a certain style, and then others write in a different style, and then it clashes. And then you have actually clashes where you define the class X and then someone else doesn't know that you've defined that. They contribute to your code and they overwrite your class. And with Sass, it produces like silent errors because it's not like you're gonna have an error in the console or somewhere. You're gonna be debugging your code for a while looking for, why is this text not blue now? And then code duplication a lot. I've done it myself, certainly with CSS, where you copy chunks, box shadow and stuff like that. You copy it all over the place. And it makes for a hard to refactor code. And I know a lot of people come to me with Sass, and Sass is certainly better than CSS, but here the problem is not really, it's not technical. The problem is more human in a sense. It's how we use the tool rather than the tool itself. And then another one that's a big kind of, well, this is the crux of it all, the really level of abstraction, or a word like that. I'm not sure I'm using it right. But the idea here is you have something like this. For example, you want to create a card. So you have simply a class card where you apply some padding, you put a little border around the div, you make it rounded corner, and you apply some shadow. And then within your Shiny application, you can use the class card, and it gives you a card. So that's the first approach with a high level of abstraction where you have one class that does basically a lot of stuff, that defines an object, a card, and then that's where you apply there. Another way of approaching that is the other way around. So we have practically the same result as we had on the previous slide. But this time we essentially apply just one rule for each class. And then in the div in Shiny, I can use multiple classes. So I can use all of these and have the same output. And that's kind of a lower level of abstraction. One thing that I've noticed, and I think is a trend, is we tend to go towards a low level of abstraction, ultimately. First, well, broadly speaking, in tech, if you like. So if you look at the first level of abstraction that I had on screen, is technically Bootstrap. If you've used Bootstrap a few classes, that's what you have. You have a class for card, you have a class for headers, you have plenty of stuff. And these are large classes with loads of rules that define one thing. And then you have other things later on, like I'll show you, that are more like the latter that I've shown. But even Bootstrap now has plenty of utility classes for padding, shadow, all of that stuff that you can now use. And one of the reasons is this, I've I'll be honest, I don't think it's just me, but I've written loads of CSS code like that. You have your card that we had originally, and then someone tells you can have a card with a bit less padding and it's the more shadow, and then you end up with you're gonna copy paste code. It's sure, and then someone else comes yet along with something else. It's not a card exactly; it's just a box, and it's a bit smaller and slightly different, and you end up with something like this that's actually unmanageable. That's why you tend to go with the other approach, and then you can just change your classes and how you use them. And essentially, that is what Tailwind CSS is, but on steroids, so to speak. So it's going to give you tons of utility classes. So here I recreated the card. This is actual just Tailwind. The classes that I named there are, they bear much better names. Like rounded, so you have rounded edges, if you like. You have shadow, you indicate that you want a border. How wide the radius of that border, the color of the border, the padding you want, and you can add tons of classes like that if you want. The pro is one of the things I really like then is that unlike something like Bootstrap, where it's going to bring in all the CSS that you're going to, well, like you tend in Shiny at least, it's going to bring all the CSS of the whole framework. Here what Tailwind does is going to parse, well, thanks to the package, it parses your R files, looks for the classes you use, and then only takes those classes in the final CSS bundle that you're going to use. It uses good practices out of the box, so things like responsiveness. Another thing that it allows you to do is, as you can imagine, when using individual classes like that, is the amount of flexibility that you have in designing something very unique. And yeah. Because I don't know, much of the web now with Bootstrap and things like that, Bulma, it's all too much of the same. So here it allows you to have something a bit more unique, I think. And then it still has some things for convenience, like you find in other frameworks, for to simplify stuff like Flex, that I've used a lot but still don't understand. But or the grid columns that we all like. It's true you don't need a web framework, a CSS framework for that, but it's a pain to recreate. So having something that supports it is good. One of the disadvantages here in Shiny, and that's something I hope to only cover a tiny bit of that, is that here you're going to use, with this package, you're going to use Tailwind CSS, and so strip the whole of Bootstrap CSS from your Shiny application. So you start bare bones, right? And therefore you have to re-implement a few things that Shiny has implemented. I cover currently just a handful of these as I was testing things. The idea, for example, the navigation, currently you'd have to redo that yourself. I'm aware it's too much to ask for most, but you'd have to redo it yourself. Things like you want to create a sidebar, you have to recreate that yourself, these sort of things. But the idea currently is you just install the package, of course, and then because I use, well, Golem, and I like to write my Shiny applications, even outside of Golem, as an R package, just love R packages, I think we should use them more. You create an application that's going to use Windy and Tailwind from an R package itself. So you create a package and then you just run this one function scaffold, and it's going to generate the basic files that you need for to run your app. And then every time you make changes to your app, you just run Windy build. It's going to rebuild all the CSS, and you can run it again. And the idea is that, well, if you know some of my other work, I do a lot of these scaffold things because I might be wrong, but I had a lot of code generation for a lot of stuff. I don't want that. If you build an app using Windy, the Windy thing is not really doing much. You're leveraging Tailwind CSS, and your app shouldn't depend on this Windy thing, which is only used at build time and not run time. So what I do is I generate a lot of code in your R package, which you can then use to run your app. So it's a bit like when if you've used Golem, you use create Golem, it's that, but it creates more stuff on top, so that you can, then simply build a CSS and run it. And that's what I have for you. You have a short, tiny demo. at the link, but really the idea is you can build whatever you want with it. So it's not opinionated. You don't expect something like you go on Bootstrap and you can see the navbar always kind of similar, or the cards always similar. With Tailwind, you build whatever you want, so it's really gonna be entirely up to you what you build. So that's it for me. Thank you. Just on time.
Yes.
Is that your life?
It's just time, but it's very good. Questions from the audience? I have one. I wonder, how much CSS do you need to master to start using your Tailwind?
The thing you don't really need to, so you don't write any CSS, you write classes, and you express what you want visually via classes, which is essentially text. And the classes are so aptly named that it's a bit more like trying to ask ChatGPT something and trying to learn to code. You know, if you rounded shadow, it's going to be around a quarter of the shadow, right?
And you have in this demo, you have enough examples that one can start copy pasting.
Yeah, it's really it's very self-evident, and the documentation is super clear. You just search what you want.
Sounds promising.
Hopefully. All right. Well, thank you.
You built this for Shiny. Does it work for other types like Flex dashboard or something?
That's a good question. It's untested. So I'll say yes.
But it should.
No, I'm not too familiar with Flex dashboard, but that works via R Markdown, right? Is that the thing, or is that the yes? I haven't tried it. I don't think so. Well, you might, but it brings in admin LTE, which depends on Bootstrap or something. So this will just add a dependency on top and might clash with Shiny. So I'm not sure. I don't think it will actually. I don't think it will now.
Version 2.
Exactly.
Yes, please.
And you mentioned Golem, so it works with Golem. Have you tried it with Rhino, which is an alternative?
No, I have to, but so Rhino doesn't take the form of an R package, if I remember correctly.
Correct, yeah.
So you would have to, I could add something so that you could instead because the scaffold just assume a certain file structure, right? And with Rhino, you would just have to assume a slightly different file structure. So it could be made to work with this, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much.